Anthropomorphism is a fundamental part of the human experience, whether it's in the human ability to visualize faces in inanimate objects, or through the perception of animals engaging with the world through a human lens. Anthropomorphism is philosophy that is ingrained into our being and psyche. The term anthropomorphism is derived from the Greek anthropos meaning human and morphe meaning form, and was first used in reference to the practice of attributing human, physical, or mental qualities to deities. However, we find that the principles of anthropomorphism completely surround us in books, TV and film, advertising and philosophy, to the conversation of, that cloud looks like a face, and all elements of the human life. In media, this is no more obviously prevalent than in animation, where characters such as Mickey Mouse, Winnie the Pooh and Scooby-Doo are king, and the anthropomorphism of animal characters is the standard storytelling practice. We can't investigate the concept of anthropomorphism without first exploring anthropocentrism. Anthropocentrism is a philosophical viewpoint that places humans in the centre of all things and having a greater value and importance than other beings. When considering human perceptions of animals and animal behaviour, it is common practice for humans to view the way animals behave through a human lens, projecting human behaviour onto said animal. This can be seen in interpretations of animal behaviours such as jealousy, hiding feelings, or deception, all of which are intentionalistic descriptors. Some scientists argue that many psychological interpretations of animal behaviour are inappropriately anthropomorphic and are therefore overinterpretations. This can go as far as natural animal behaviours being demonised due to anthropocentric interpretations of them. For example, elephant mothers being labelled as vicious after kicking their newborn babies. Despite our human-centric perception determining that this action comes from a place of cruelty or anger, in reality, this behaviour is completely natural, as instinctively, elephants kick dust over a newborn baby to mask their smell from predators and to protect their skin from the sun. This example demonstrates to us the potential negative and serious effects of anthropocentric interpretations of animals, and how viewing non-human creatures through a human-centric lens can be completely misleading to understanding their true psychology and intentions. But how does this anthropocentrism relate to our approach to creating anthropomorphic characters in media? To explore this, let's start by examining Mickey Mouse, possibly the most iconic character in animation history. As his name suggests, Mickey Mouse is a mouse, sharing the animal's long pointed snout, round ears, dark round eyes, and tail. However, these features are where many of the similarities stop, as Mickey's arms are far longer and thinner than the mouse's. His mouth is bigger and more expressive, he has human-like hands and feet, walks on bipedal, and of course he wears clothes and speaks. Not only are we viewing this mouse character through the lens of human motivation, feeling and thought, as we are inclined to do when observing even real animals, but we have now transformed it, making Mickey Mouse in our own humanistic image. These design decisions are made not only due to artistic and stylistic choices, but also because of the way that we as humans connect with the beings around us. Research has shown that humans react more favourably to animals that are perceived as sharing greater behavioural and physical resemblance to humans than those that are not perceived as such. This is also supported by evidence suggesting that humans actively dislike animals that are particularly dissimilar to them, like invertebrates. In addition, research into social psychology has found that people are more empathetic to other people who they perceive as being similar to them. With this in mind, we can draw the conclusion that for the purpose of storytelling, creating an animal character that resembles many physical and behavioural traits of humans allows the character a more empathetic and relatable lens from its human audience. But what happens when some animal characters are anthropomorphised less than others? Well, as in Alvin and the Chipmunks, when our protagonists and anthropomorphic stars of the film, Alvin, Simon and Theodore, are running across the lobby from their home in the Christmas tree, they briefly encounter a fearsome dog barking at them. This dog is completely non-anthropomorphic, as it is live action, has a completely natural form, and engages in only natural dog behaviours. For the sake of the film, the dog acts purely as a prop, a quick, threatening obstacle to be avoided and to divert the chipmunk's path. It could easily be replaced with a ball or spiky object for roughly the same impact. The chipmunks, however, get to have an emotional reaction to this, and an entire story to follow on from this moment. From this example, we can see the effect of anthropomorphised characters versus non-anthropomorphised characters through the film lens, and how anthropomorphism allows the audience to connect with an animal, where without that, connection becomes harder and animals can become background props. What happens when an anthropomorphic animal character displays more animalistic traits? For example, in Wes Anderson's Fantastic Mr. Fox, the character performances use both anthropomorphic and naturalistic animal behaviours to create a sense of contrast. This achieves a stylistic effect, but also has key links to an underlying theme of wild nature versus domesticated living. In exploring this, we can also reflect in a meta way the different feelings that this contrast can evoke in us as a human audience. This contrast can be seen in Mr. Fox's breakfast scene, where Mr. Fox is served breakfast before work. In this scene, prior to receiving his breakfast, Mr. and Mrs. Fox are conversing about Fox's column in the newspaper, their nephew coming to stay, and the idea of moving to a new home, all of which are distinctly humanistic, as well as occurring in the form of a conversation itself, another clearly anthropomorphic behaviour. This conversation is concluded when Mrs. Fox presents Mr. Fox with his breakfast, and Mr. Fox, despite having a knife, fork and plate set on the table, devours the breakfast at super speed using only his hands and mouth, accompanied by aggressive animalistic eating sounds. This scene highlights a contrast between the hyper-anthropomorphic, humanistic qualities of the characters of Mr. and Mrs. Fox and the natural animal behaviours that they, as foxes, should be exhibiting. In addition, when viewing this contrast, the audience experiences an edginess to the film, distinctly moving it away from more traditional children's animation. Perhaps we can interpret this as a result of the shock of seeing such an intensely anthropomorphic character suddenly revert to animalistic behaviours, creating a sense of almost a fourth wall break, and resulting in a feeling of disconnect and unease in the human audience. But how do we choose to depict and interpret animal characters that have no obvious anthropomorphic traits? When beginning to explore this, it's hard to ignore the plethora of family dog films, telling the story of the relationship between a dog and their owner and the highs and lows that they encounter. Think Marley and Me, Air Bud and Beethoven. But contrasting this, we're met with the immense list of films that centre non-anthropomorphic animals as an antagonist or villain, so much so that it makes up its own genre, natural horror. Natural horror is a subgenre of horror films featuring forces of nature, usually in the form of animals and plants, that pose a threat to human characters. These depictions of killer animals have existed since the release of films such as Island of Lost Souls and King Kong. However, more popular examples include Hitchcock's The Birds and Spielberg's Jaws. Of course, this genre has continued up to present day, spanning animals from sharks and piranhas to spiders, bees and bears, with the release of Cocaine Bear just last year. This conflict between these depictions of beloved heroic animals and evil killer animals may seem contradictory. However, we can interpret this as a clear projection of our own psychology onto these animal characters. This is incredibly common in attitudes to insects and arachnids, who are demonised not only through media, but also in our day-to-day lives, with approximately 6% of the UK population, or 4 million people, suffering from arachnophobia. This arachnophobia is mirrored in the many spider antagonists in our films, from ice spiders and tarantula, to spider and spider-like motifs being incorporated into films such as Enemy and Possum, purely to create maximum discomfort in the viewer. We can analyse this attribution of certain animals to horror antagonist tropes as a reflection of an inability to anthropomorphise that humans experience towards a creature, resulting in a discomfort and fear from this lack of perceived similarity. In summary, through this exploration into anthropomorphic animal characters and the contrast between them and their non-anthropomorphic counterparts, it's clear to see a strong connection between the perceived similarity and anthropomorphism of an animal and the connections humans feel towards them. While positively, this can allow us to connect outside of our own species, this reliance on anthropomorphism can clearly skew our perceptions of certain animals and result in negative attitudes and behaviours towards them, as well as misinterpretation of true animal behaviour. Perhaps for humans, the way forward is to focus less on searching to find the human qualities within nature, but instead to see animals as animals, to see ourselves as animals, and to blur the lines that separate us from the world around us.